scope of those liberties. And I will note here, as I've noted many times, I noted in the previous video, you can't do this a la carte with the government. The moment you grant the proposition that it is a proper function of government to interfere in these matters, you have given away the game. If they have the power to act, they have the power to act for good, and they have the power to act for bad. Similarly, if you restrain the power of the government, and they obey it, it prevents them from doing good things, and it prevents them from doing bad things. And history has shown that the bads that a government can do can easily outweigh any goods that might obtain from it. We've just come out of a century that left hundreds of millions of people slaughtered by governments acting badly. This is a country that was founded so that way it could tell the government, no, these are not your proper functions. We are not your property. And indeed, the reason I say you can't do this a la carte is there's not a law that you can write strong enough that some judges, some legislators, and some executives won't pretend that when it says, government, you are absolutely prohibited from doing this, that really what that means is that the government is entitled to do it. Take the First Amendment. The Congress shall pass no law. It does not say the Congress shall pass only what laws it deems reasonable with respect to religion and freedom of speech and the free exercise of religion, establishment, and whatnot. It says it is an absolute denial of power to the federal government. Congress, you may make no law on this subject, which is now interpreted to mean actually they can make any and every law that they want on this subject so long as they complain loudly enough and plead incompetence or say that it's very, very, very important to them as opposed to just very important to them. An absolute denial of power to a government, when the government exceeds that, when it trespasses that, is a tyranny. And once you let it do it just a little bit, it's going to continue doing it. Take something like the Fifth Amendment. People hear about the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. There is no such right in the Constitution. It carves out a right in the sense that it is a denial of power to the government. Your right rests in the fact that it's beyond the government's power to force you to be a witness against yourself. This is one of the provisions of the Bill of Rights that refers to the government and denies it a power. Now, over time, this was referred to as the right against self-incrimination, that kind of thing. Well, if you go read the legal literature, it's not actually a right against self-incrimination. It says it's a privilege that you have. Well, a privilege can be abrogated at the whim of the government. And just 2 terms ago in Salinas against Texas, you had a case where a guy was being accused of murder. He voluntarily went to the police station to talk to them. And they were having very friendly conversation, just rather banal kinds of things. Oh, we just want to clear you, these are just routine questions. And then they turn on a dime and, oh, by the way, if we go search your house, will we find whatever the exact phrasing of the question was. And the guy did not answer the question. He stopped talking. The government may not force you to bear witness against yourself. He closed his fucking trap and did not answer that question. So the trial comes around. Prosecutor stands up. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when asked if his weapon would match the weapon used in this particular murder, the defendant did not answer that question, from which it is entirely proper for you to infer that is indicia of his guilt. That goes to serve your inference that he is guilty of the crime for which he's accused. It goes all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court goes, actually, that's a great fucking argument. Oh my God, we've never had an argument this good. Yes, if you don't answer the question and you don't incant some magic words that say, section blah 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 of article whatever in the Constitution, or something like that says I don't have to answer your question, and you don't answer it, they can use that as evidence of your guilt. The provision in the Constitution was an absolute denial of power. State, you may not do this. Same thing as the First Amendment. State, you may not do this. Whenever you let the government do it just a little bit, it will continue to push it against that line. And the fact that we have the kinds of decisions I'm talking about here deals with that exact problem. Even when you give them an absolute denial of power to act at all, they still try to claim that when it says we're not allowed to act at all, it really means we're allowed to act as long as we come up with a really good reason. No. So don't use the criminal law to address these kinds of issues. It is dangerous and it is idiotic. and it is unnecessary. You don't have to give the state the power to use the criminal law to fuck with people's religious exercise in order to try to save the lives of children. You don't have to do it. You only have to be mildly clever. Okay, so you might have caught on by now, except for the people who object to my previous video, I'm talking here about using the criminal law. That is to say, using laws that allow the state to run in somewhere and say, we claim ownership over your body, and we will take you, cart you off and put you in a small little cell and keep you there as long as we want. And in the particular case, with religious exercise, in general, you have two types of commands by a government. You may not do something, or you must do something. And these are not similar types of things, though in some cases they can result in similar criminal sanctions. Forbidding a person to engage in conduct is quite a different matter than mandating a person to do something. We typically give categorical exemptions for in mandating people to do something to which they are, for a good reason, morally opposed to doing. Oh, you are a conscientious objector. You don't have to go to war. Oh, you have this particular moral position or a religious position. We won't force you to do this other thing. Now, some people try to take advantage of that by coming up with ad hoc religions, like the Church of Marijuana and whatnot, which, it's not a bona fide religion. They are inventing it and calling it a religion specifically to be excused from the ambit of law. These people, because of their idiocy, result in decisions that also affect people who do have bona fide objections to things on religious grounds. These people should be slapped. Anyway, putting off the ad hoc thing, I'm here talking only about sincere belief, legitimate belief. People with the best of intentions and all goodwill and good conscience and who are trying their best simply are wrong. And someone, as a consequence of that, might die. You accept this every day, day in, day out, just as I do. When a doctor, through the best of his professional judgment, makes a decision that kills one of his patients, we don't criminally prosecute that person. Indeed, in the last 200 years, for malpractice, there have only been something like 40 prosecutions, 40 to 45 prosecutions in this country. And those prosecutions didn't come because it was malpractice per se. They came because it was malpractice incident to other unlawful activity, like the Michael Jackson death, where he was using the fact that he was a doctor to get around other laws and in turn essentially giving the guy drugs he shouldn't have had. So it wasn't simply medical malpractice. It was medical malpractice plus violations of other criminal statutes. Now, there may be civil liability that attaches, but that's not anywhere in my argument. I'm talking about the criminal law here. I'm going to keep mentioning the criminal law so the people who are a little slower in my previous video will understand I'm talking about the criminal law. Okay, so typically we give people an exemption when they're mandated to take some course of conduct that is on the moral spectrum to which people can reasonably have moral objections. Now, with respect to the doctors, a lot of people tried to raise with me arguments about when a doctor tells you something, you should rely on it. Okay. When a doctor tells you something, it may well be reasonable to rely on it. But doctors are wrong quite a lot. As I've mentioned, upwards of 400,000 fresh corpses are piled at the altar of medical science every year through its practitioners getting it wrong. And I'm not talking here necessarily about the high-risk things like heart transplants, where it's like, well, not a great success rate, but we got to, if you're willing to try, it's better than doing nothing, we think, maybe, possibly. I'm talking about people who go get routine tests. Oh, you've had some headaches that turn out to be idiopathic. There's no tumor. In fact, it's just that you've had some stress, you've got a headache, but because your doctor's practicing preventive medicine or whatever, decides, we'll get a CAT scan with and without contrast. But unbeknownst to anyone, you are allergic to the contrast. So you sit down, they inject you, heart attack, dead. Those people would be better served ignoring medical science entirely than trying to take advantage of it. Now, some people said, oh, that's an insult to medical science. I'm sorry if it's an insult to medical science that its practitioners are killing people. Maybe they should stop killing people, and that would be much more to the credit of medical science. But medical science isn't a person. It doesn't have fucking feelings, and even if it does, the one thing that one of the things that undergirds all science, anything that can properly be called a science, is that there are no authorities. No one is beyond insult for their judgment. No one is beyond reproach, and no position is a dogma. It's not a doctrine. They are all provisionally true. And doctors, unfortunately, like a lot of scientists, don't understand statistics, and they tell patients things that are not supported by any evidence anywhere and couldn't possibly be supported by any evidence anywhere. And all these criminal prosecutions about parents who, in the states that allow it, who are being prosecuted because they didn't get medical care for their children on religious grounds, you will get some doctor who shows up in court and says, oh, to a 99% degree of confidence, if we had taken this course of action, that child would have lived. No doctor could possibly know that. Ever. It is not within the bailiwick of science. It is not within the ambit of science to know that. It is a misunderstanding of statistics, and it is an overrepresentation, even assuming the statistics were perfect, and it wasn't fallacious to try to draw inferences about particular people based on what's true of populations. Even if it were true that you could do that, the data are never good enough to say that. And yet that is what they testify to under oath in court to get convictions against people who make decisions they don't like. Anyway, yeah, I do get worked up about this. People fight wars over this shit. It is important. Okay. So, in addition to doctors dramatically overplaying their hand, fallaciously, by the way, if you want to look it up, it's called an ecological fallacy. You may not draw conclusions about particular people based on what you know or think you know about a group. Yet, these people who are overawed by the authority of a guy in a white coat will say, defer, defer. Or maybe not defer to just one, but if all of them are saying something, you should defer. First of all, there is no medical treatment that all doctors will agree on. Anyway, so if you disagree with doctors because of your wacky religious beliefs, you're a bad person, you're evil, criminal law needs to obtain. If I do it because I've read a study and said it doesn't support your proposition and nope, sorry, shove it, I guess I have to get a pass because my decision was made more intelligently. Even if I'm wrong and my kid dies and the religious person is right just by accident and their kid lives. Anyway, these